Hey there, Dr. Mark here, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how to set your macros. This is a topic I am very passionate about because there's an old way of doing things when it comes to setting your macros, an outdated way, and a way that, let's call it the textbook way, that if you do it, it could work, but chances are it sets you up for failure because it doesn't take into account what you're currently doing and your knowledge levels, and it's not very individualized. So today I'm going to show you a better way of setting your macros. And this is something you can do for yourself to improve your eating habits, maybe reach a body composition result, or something that you can do to work with nutrition clients to get them the best results. This is something that we teach in the Nutrition Coaching Academy. I'm very excited to share it with you. Today, I'm going to break things down in a little bit of a different way. We're going to use this whiteboard to break down how to set your macros. Let's talk about, first off, the old way of doing things. Let me do this. Old way. When you're setting your macros or doing some sort of tracking-based approach, remember, your food contains calories, which is where we derive our energy, and where we get those calories from are the large components of our food called the macronutrients, which are protein, carbohydrates, and fat. And we measure those macronutrients in grams, and through the process of oxidation or break down those nutrients and burn them for energy and for calories. And that is what over periods of time dictates if we gain tissue or gain fat, or lose tissue and lose fat. And it comes down to those balance of energy, and where that energy comes from dictates where the balance is and what changes are made or are seen. So when you're tracking your nutrition, you're typically tracking it with the intent of setting up some food levels for energy or calories and where the energy is coming from and the macronutrients to get a specific result. What you used to do, so old way, first thing would be a specific outcome. You want to get a better sense of how much food you need to be consuming to get that outcome. That is going to have the largest influence on your success. And typically what would happen is you'd use some sort of calculation, textbook calculation, to get a sense of how much energy you're burning. If you know how much energy you're burning, you therefore can get a sense of how much energy you should be consuming to get a specific result. If you're going under that energy, you're going to be in a calorie deficit and therefore losing some sort of tissue, depending on where the energy is coming from and what else you're doing in terms of exercise and what stress you're putting on your body. And if you're in a calorie surplus, which means you're ingesting more energy on a daily basis than you are burning, you're going to be gaining some sort of tissue. We use a textbook calculation, something like the Harris-Benedict equation or the Mifflin-St. to input some variables based on our individual situation to understand how much energy we're burning. And we call that our energy expenditure. If you've never seen my tracking sheet before, you could do this. And again, this is sort of the old way, but I'm going to show you a different way in a second, which you could also do on the sheet. You can use the Harris-Benedict equation. So for me specifically, I'm a male, 185 pounds, 37 years old, 5'7". All my secrets are out of the bag here. Using the Harris-Benedict formula is going to give me a basal metabolic rate, which is the largest component of our metabolism. For most people, around 60 to 70% of the calories we burn on a daily basis are the calories you burn at rest. You're just existing. This includes your circulation, moving blood around, breathing, all those normal processes that happen with us just existing. If you were to lay in bed all day, I specifically, based on this calculation, would be burning around 1,800 calories. Then we factor in an exercise coefficient, depending on how active you are. I'm moderately active, so we take that number and multiply it by 1.37, which gives me an energy maintenance level of calories, which means I'm not gaining any weight and I'm not losing any weight. I'm eating the exact appropriate amount of weight to maintain my body weight on average of around 2,500 calories. Again, these are estimates, and not every day would be exactly the same. But if you took a big picture step back and thought about all the days, most days, they would look on average pretty similar. So this is 2,500 calories, saying if I wanted to track my food and maintain my body weight, I need to be eating 2,500 calories per day. If I set my macros, it's basically setting the targets for where those calories should come from. And this can be really effective to achieve a specific body composition result. If you're a nutrition coach watching this, you know that, and you're probably getting a better sense of what is the best way to set these targets. The old way would be to start filling this amount of food with the amount of protein, carbs, and fat based on optimal levels that we've, assessed and observed through peer-reviewed research that someone should be consuming to improve their body composition. Typically, those would be, and again, remember, I'm Canadian and I'm in kind of an interesting place of using both imperial and metric units. But if I'm 185 pounds, I'm roughly, 84 kilos. So keep this in mind, weighing 5 or 84 kg. We start to base some levels of optimal macronutrients based on someone's body weight. So the old way would be protein. If you're looking to get leaner or gain some muscle, most people should be consuming between 1.5 to 3.0, and 3 would be on the high end, grams per kilogram of protein. So keep in mind this 84 kilos. Usually the first number you set for macronutrients would be protein. If you're tracking your macros, because it is the most important macronutrient when it comes to improving your body composition or achieving, an athletic goal for the most part. And that's because it's involved in, gaining new lean body tissue, as well as it improves your metabolism and typically burns more calories than the other macronutrients. As well as if you're looking to get leaner, it's really good at sparing the muscle that you already do have. You got to remember that when you're looking to lose fat, you're looking to be in a calorie deficit. In order to lose fat, you're going to be taking in less calories than you are burning, and your body senses this situation. If it was coming from a place of survival, it would say, hey, I'm not taking in as much calories as I typically do. Why don't I start breaking down some of the tissue that costs a lot to run? It takes a lot of energy to run. That would be your muscle. And it starts to break that down at a rate higher than we normally would like to see. When you're losing fat, or you're trying to lose weight, you're never losing just body fat. You're never losing just fat tissue. It's going to be a combination of fat tissue and lean body mass. But by eating more protein, the adequate amount of protein, you can start to spare the muscle that you already do have. And it does that by burning some of the protein that you're taking in. It does that by burning more of the protein that you're taking in. So the first number that we would set based on these 2,500 calories would be protein. And typically, again, we're kind of getting a sense of, what are someone's goals, what I should be doing. I could use just an average number in the middle, and it would be 2.0 grams per kilogram of protein. If I take that, let's do 2 times 84 kilograms. And again, these numbers in imperial, I could give you them as well, but let's just do everything in metric for the sake of ease here. We got 84 times 2 is going to be 168 grams of protein. Now, messy writing. Maybe I should have been a conventional medical doctor with my chicken scratch here. But actually, you know what? My penmanship's pretty good if I try. So maybe I'll just start trying too. A little bit harder. Got 160 grams of protein. You'll remember that for every gram of protein, that's going to supply 4 calories. So when we break that down, it's going to give us 4 calories. So we take that 168. And again, remember, we're setting macros, which are going to be a function of the amount of energy that we're consuming. So we're essentially like allotting calories for each specific macronutrient. So we want to think about, okay, well, how much of the protein is contributing to this total amount of calories? We take that, and again, this is 4 kcal per gram. So we take 168 times it by 4, and I'm just bringing my calculator up here. 168 times 4, 672 calories. We take 672 minus 2,500, and we essentially had 1,800 calories left to work with to fill our remaining carbohydrates and fat. Now, the next macronutrient you typically would set in the conventional way would be dietary fat, and optimal levels of dietary fat for most individuals are going to be 0.5 to 1.5 grams per kilogram. If we're thinking about just the average person with, mixed goals, let's set this right at 1.0, which would be smack dab right in the middle. We have 1.0 times 84. So we have 84 grams of fat. We're going to see how many calories that accounts for in a second, but you also want to keep in mind, usually most people, when you're tracking your nutrition, and we can talk a little bit about using a food tracking app to start to track towards these targets in a second, but most individuals just round this number to the nearest 5 to get some sense of that. But let's just do it with the actual per gram numbers to begin with. 84 grams. Now, dietary fat is more energy dense per gram. So we're going to take that 84 and times it by the amount of calories it has per gram, which is more than double. It's actually 9 calories per gram. Take my 84 times 9. How many calories does it contribute? We have 756. If I have 3 things that contribute to a total pie, all I need to do is take the amount of calories and subtract it off, and I'll be left with the remaining calories to give myself enough macronutrients to stay at a maintenance level of food. What that would look like in this situation is taking, if we start right from scratch and not just the 1,800, but let's just take the 1,800. 1,800 minus additional 756 equals minus 756 equals 1,044 calories, which means, and just typically, if we think about, probably the most carbohydrates aren't required in the same way in the human diet that protein and fat are. We need protein for the nitrogen, we need dietary fat for the essential fatty acids, and therefore we typically set them first. They're a little bit more, I want to use the word dispensable, but the nutrition people could get mad at me for that with amino acids. But carbohydrates are a little bit more dispensable in the diet, and therefore we typically set them last. Depending on your preferences and your activity levels, which we'll talk about in a second when we talk about the new way, and in my humble opinion, the better way. But typically we're going to take these carbohydrates. We've got 1,044 calories left for them. We are going to take them and divide by the 4 calories per gram to get the gram amount of carbohydrates in our diet. So we take 1,044. If you're a math person, you're probably thinking this is probably pretty close to 250 divided by 4. You have 261 grams of carbs, 84 grams of fat. If I wanted to maintain my diet based on what the theoretical situation would say, based on who I am as an individual and some rough activity levels, I would want to be consuming 2,500 calories, from which I'd have 168 grams of protein, 261 grams of carbs, and 84 grams of fat. If you were to start to work with a client or yourself, want to improve your eating habits and stay at maintenance, that would be one of the most straightforward ways to set your macronutrient targets. With that being said, many people start doing this stuff, follow it, and they get the opposite effect of what they wanted. If these are my maintenance calories, I would typically go lower in order to lose weight. I can't tell you how many times coaches come into our program, set clients up on something they would feel is a calorie deficit based on the calculations that we see this way, and their client gains weight and no one knows what to make of it. The coach says, just trust the process, this will get better. The client says, I don't feel like this is working for me. I want to do something different. They fall off. It's not great. Why do you think that is? Well, in my experience, and after working with thousands of nutrition clients and after training hundreds of coaches, it typically is because what someone should be able to do. Oh man, that was so messy. Let's see if I can use my cool new smart board from NearHub, which I'm going to do more features on because I'm really enjoying using it. It's because theory versus actual are two different things. What someone should be able to do and what they're actually doing are almost like apples and oranges. Over on the right-hand side here with the actual, we have some underreporting, we have some miscalculations of what you're doing. There's a bunch of things that make it less accurate, not any less important, but just make it less accurate. So we want to keep that in mind as we're setting these targets, and we kind of almost want to bake them into our targets. What I would do is, we don't need to abandon the old way altogether, but I'd almost want to use it the old way as a goalpost. I'm setting it up as a goalpost on this side, and I'm also going to set up another goalpost over here based on what I'm currently doing. How would I figure out what I'm currently doing? The best way to do that is start to track what my normal habits are, what my normal intake is without changing a thing. What I would get you to do is track your intake for 5 days using a smartphone app, nutrition tracking app, without changing a thing. Ideally include a weekend day so we can get a sense of how things change with your habits in a different situation. When you're not doing the same thing you are typically throughout the week, maybe more social eating, maybe you sleep in a little bit, maybe you have more time to prepare food. That allows us to get a better sense of, on average, what is normal for you. But track your intake over 5 days. You're gonna get averages for calories, protein, carbs, and fat. And if over the course of these 5 days, your body weight doesn't change very much, let's say it stays within, 1 pound or 0.5 pounds throughout the course of the week, which it won't always, because now that you're being watched, you're probably going to make different food decisions. But if it stays within that level, we know that you're pretty close to maintenance levels. Now, that could be different than what the calculation says you should actually be doing, but this actual number is probably much closer to what you need to be tracking at or setting your starting numbers based on that. So let's say, for example, through this period of time, I see that my average calories through these 5 days, without my body weight changing at all, is 2250. And my protein, based on the actual numbers, is now 95 grams through the average of those days. My carbohydrates are around, and again, I'm just now estimating some numbers. Let's do 390. Let's do this and just make sure that the actual numbers, 95 times 4, 380 calories. 300 times 4, 1200. 90 times 9 should be 810. This is a little bit higher than 2250. Let's go. I just want to make sure the numbers check out. So it's a good example. 1200 plus 380. This is 2390. So let's just say that carb number is a little high, 280 times 4. Again, just setting these numbers right here. 95 times 4, we'll keep that number the same, 380. But I'm gonna move this at 280 times 4, just for the averages here. And I've done videos like this in the past. You guys are always like, show me the numbers. So I'm hoping that does that for you here. We got 1120 calories coming from carbohydrates. 1120 plus 810 plus 380 is going to give us 2,300 calories. This would probably be a little bit of underreporting, but there's also some individual variation, so that's okay. Instead of jumping right to these numbers, these theoretical numbers, I would set some macronutrient targets somewhere in the middle. So instead of like essentially almost doubling our protein, let's say we start our calories at 2,300 because we know that's pretty close to maintenance. And depending on what someone's goals are, we should probably go a little bit lower if they're looking to lose fat. But let's say we'll start with that number just to see how things go for the first week and then go from there. But let's start with that 2,300 and then find some middle ground on the protein. Going right to 168 grams right away might be way too much for my habits, might be way too much for my knowledge level. So let's start this off at 135. And then typically, depending on, I know these optimal ranges, and I knew right in the middle, let's say 280 carbs divided by 84 grams is around 3. That's probably close to where we should start, because for most individuals, maintenance levels of carbohydrates are between 2.0 to 5 grams per kilogram, depending on your activity levels. So that would be right around 3. Let's start with 135 grams of protein. And again, this is a little bit of Plinko and stuff, but these initial numbers are going to be a much better place to start from a coaching perspective to meet the person where they're at than just trusting what the textbook says. So let's start with 135 grams of protein. Fat, we know optimally probably can be around 80 grams. And since, this person, maybe it was me, their averages were close to 90, we know they can get there. We know it's within their wheelhouse to be there. We got 80 now with 135. We're gonna take those numbers, 135 times 4, 540. 80 times 9, should be 720. And fill the rest with carbs, which will probably be a little bit lower than what the theoretical said. Sorry, it should actually be pretty similar. 135, sorry. Let's go 2,300 minus 540 minus 720 equals 1,040 divided by 4. 260. And I'll put this 1,040 in here. These numbers, 135 grams of protein, 260 grams of carbs, and 80 grams of fat, are going to be a better starting number for this individual, theoretical individual, me, to see some results and get closer to what they need to be doing, because we're starting to bake in some of the things that actually happen with their normal habitual intake and meet them where they're at, instead of just blindly trusting what the textbook says that they should do. This isn't bad, but in my experience, it should just set up a goalpost where we set up another goalpost, and based on what we're seeing, set some numbers in the middle. If I was setting macros for you as my client, that's where I would start. And if you actually want me to go through one of these assessment processes with you, comment assessment down in the comments below, and I'll send over some next steps for me to set your macro targets, which in my experience will be much more optimal for you as an individual. And that's it, folks. Hopefully that gives you some clarity on the best way to set your macros and not just listening to what the textbook says you should do. With that being said, I have broken down this concept elsewhere, especially when it comes to setting macros for fat loss. You're gonna learn all about that in this video I've linked up right here. So check it out now, and I'll see you in the next video.